Welcome to the third in a series of conference calls by USINPAC in advance of the 2014 elections next month in India. My name is John, and I'll be your moderator for the conference call. If you are logged in through WebEx, you will have seen the instructions for this call and submitting questions. With such a large call, we hope that you understand that we cannot let everyone ask questions, which is why all the attendees are muted. We ask that you submit your questions via the election 2014 email address or through our question bit.ly. Email address is election2014@usinpac.com. Bit.ly is http://bit.ly/1IB1LPR. We'll be monitoring both of these portals during the call. Now to start the special expert series conference call, I would like to introduce our chairman of USINPAC, Mr. Sanjay Puri. Sanjay?
Rubinder, go ahead.
Yes, please.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. This is our third in series of the Indian Election Expert Series. We have had excellent guests who have provided detailed analysis. This election is being watched around the world. It's been called one of the most consequential elections in India, largest exercise of democracy. But from a U.S.-India perspective, from an Indian-American perspective, it has a special meaning. Some people are even suggesting that the resignation of the U.S. ambassador to India recently this week has something to do with the elections. We obviously don't know that. But we've got two excellent guests. And to begin introduction and take it from here, we have Rabinder Sachdev, our India Operations Head, who will take it from here. Rabinder?
Thank you so much, Sanjay. As Sanjay mentioned, we have two eminent panelists today. Each one of them will be taking around 15 to 20 minutes to give their views and answer some questions and our thoughts. The first speaker will be Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Dr. Rajiv Kumar is a renowned world economist, and presently he is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. He is also the author of several books. He was formerly the Secretary General of FICCI, the industry association in India. Now, without much ado, I would invite Dr. Kumar to give us some of his perspectives of what he sees could be the impact and what are the trends in the current elections. Dr. Kumar, please.
Thank you very much, Ravinder, and hi, everybody. Good morning. And hi, Sanjay there. It's nice to be on this webinar, and I hope you can all hear me very clearly. What I'd like to do is to just give you first an impression of what I think are these current trends and where they are, where these results are headed. And second is then to talk about what I feel would be the kind of impact on the Indian economy, because I'm an economist, but also more specifically than on the India-US relations. The way I look at it at the moment is that there is a very high probability of the NDA, which is BJP and his allies, coming very close to, if not exceeding, the absolute majority number, the magic number of 272. Several surveys that have been done, opinion surveys that have come out, range now to give the figure of 246 or 256 to the NDA, and I think this number is going to rise as we go forward. And this really will be historical in some sense, because it would mean that BJP itself would perhaps double its tally from 2009, and this will be the highest ever that it ever got. And this is because of the states like in the Hindi heartland, like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and more specifically UP and Bihar, where it is expected to do sort of kind of in an unprecedented manner. And it's clear now that what's happening is that there is, if you like, a Modi wave. Many people have said that this election is more about an anger with the current government, a sense of betrayal with the government for not having sustained the rate of growth which they had inherited. But I think while that is true, it is also clear that it is also the persona of Modi, which has which has helped to gravitate the voters and focus their attention. I dare say, with another leader, BJP may not have done as well as he has done. And I'm told by people that I talk to in UP and Bihar and others that as happens in India, in the villages, in the remote villages, his name has got got into people's minds, and the people are talking about Modi more than they are talking about the party or anything else. And that shows up in the huge lead, 19-point lead that Modi has today over Rahul Gandhi as the choice for the Prime Minister. And that's also, again, I think, quite unprecedented. The last time we had Congress showing, of this sort of order, was the 77 elections where they just managed 154 seats. I think this year they'll probably be in double digits. And there I must slip into, and there, so that's one point that I'll get back to. And the other, of course, is the fate of some of the regional parties or the identity-based parties, which is like the Samajwadi Party and the Bahujan Samajwadi Party, BSP, or the left in West Bengal and Kerala, or the JDU in Bihar, who had their appeal really around certain sort of caste and other identities or regional identities. I think they will suffer much worse. Any sort of thought of a third front getting into the fray for government formation has receded far more than what one had thought a month ago. Two facts here. One, that the sort of near implosion of the Congress vote, which will see it being confined to, in some sense, Karnataka, Kerala, Assam, and in some numbers in, I think, very few in UP and Bihar, would mean that it'll have to kind of, it'll have to go back to the very basics to again reemerge as a national party. And that's a huge exercise. And and that will be very interesting to see whether this exercise is undertaken under the current leadership, or there is a move, as has happened in the past in the Congress, that when they suffer as much as they are expected to do now, there's a move to change the leadership. And if that happens, that will have very strong and wide-ranging implications for politics in India. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that the BJP's emergence at that level, in such large numbers, would also put put an onus on them to deliver then to the expectations. And that is where sometimes I get scared, because these expectations are very high. There seem to be, on the one hand, one can say a very healthy democracy within BJP, but the sort of not such a nice way of putting it is also that there are major differences, major ideological differences within that party. And so whether they'll be able to come up with a coherent program of governance and deliverables is something that I'm not so sure of. And this perhaps is reflected in the fact that they have not yet been able to come up with their manifesto, despite the fact that I know they had a lot of inputs on their vision documents and on their manifesto now for several months. So this to me needs careful watching, and also requires that the people who work with BJP and around them should continue to give them inputs for them to make up their mind on what is a coherent economic policy. So then let me just shift quickly to the impact on growth. I think I'm here now going on the very sort of strong assumption that there will be a Modi government, and therefore that will see a sharp focus on providing better governance. And that's a huge deficit at the moment in the country, and that will reawaken the investor sentiment. The other two would, of course, be their efforts to improve the investor sentiment by announcing some major steps for liberalization of the rules and regulations that govern the small and medium enterprises, as also some of the regulatory impediments on, like environment and others. I doubt if they will spend too much of their political capital on trying to roll back some of the recent laws that have been passed, because that will be, that will, as it were, dissipate the political will, the political capital. But they will probably move very quickly on trying to get the investment sentiment back. Finally, let me just talk about very briefly about India-US relations. I think any fears that a Modi government would mean a worsening of the India-US relations are misplaced. He is far too pragmatic a person for that to happen, and therefore he will in some sense let these take their own course, and there will be an effort on the part of the US to reach out to him, as has been now noticed. And because of the very strong NRI presence in his campaign group, I think, but that needs to be further strengthened to ensure that detractors within the BJP, who would much rather do the Swadeshi bit and see US as something which is as a country, which does not serve India's interests, that particular group within the BJP needs to be countered, and I hope our India-American friends will take that challenge, because that is required at the moment. Modi will focus, I think, on Japan. You will see, he might well be the first country that he visits. He is very pragmatic towards China, but will give out clear signals, as he has done in his rallies in Arunachal Pradesh, that he will not let China muscle in on, politically or in security terms. He would draw very strong red lines, but yet be willing to do business and carry that forward. And finally, that the neighborhood, I think, will receive Modi's attention. He has made that clear. That and as the Pakistanis themselves say, maybe this will be the time again, like in the previous NDA government, that we could see some movement in India-Pakistan relations, which are positive, because Pakistan would realize that any attempt to weaken or harm India's security would be taken much less lightly than had been taken in the past. So overall, I think you would see a recovery in the economy beginning to take place soon after the elections. But it will not be a V-shaped recovery. It will take time for the investor to get back, to investment to come back, and then to do, and then for the economy to sort of get onto the higher trajectory. It will be, I think, a couple of years at least before it gets back to the 8% that it had before 2010. Let me sort of stop here and invite any questions that the audience might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. I think you've given such a well-rounded view, going from, in fact, going from politics to economy to foreign affairs. Now, one of the questions which is coming up from one of our guests is that it is said that India could need up to $1 trillion for its infrastructure projects over the next 5 years. Now, how will the Indian government, assuming it is a Modi dispensation, mobilize such funds? And of course, I mean, it dovetails into the second part, which you were slightly mentioning earlier, that given the fact that probably more pools of capital are sitting in Asia, would such an investment be more kind of forthcoming, or the government would be more proactive to solicit investments from the Asian pools compared to, let's say, the West or the US?
There is one part of Modi's economics which takes us in the direction of improving the performance of public sector undertakings and taking giving the rightful role to the government for infrastructure development, and as it has happened in Gujarat. So a part of that, as I'm saying, is that, for example, the coal mess that we have, he will probably focus a lot on improving the performance of Coal India Limited, so that the coal availability increases. But at the same time, we will see we will see, that he will reach out to the NRIs in a much bigger way, and to the US-based infrastructure fund. But as I said, he will shift to Japan, and he'll look to Asia pools, as you're saying, the capital sitting there to get that investment. But more importantly, I think he will get the regulatory structure in place and get it working better than what's happened in the past.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Kumar. A question coming in from Ash Thakur. He's from Atlanta. I think that's a question which he's referring to which a lot of us are very concerned about the banking crisis and the non-performing assets, the non-performing loans. What is your view on this?
Yeah. I'm on the central board of the State Bank of India, which is where I notice a lot of this problem as it happens. But and I think the reason for the non-performing loans or non-performing assets is twofold. One is the kind of draconian cut in public expenditures that have meant that the payments, the receivables from the government are not coming forth, which that would mean that the debt servicing ability of these borrowers or these public-private partner players has gone down quite dramatically. That's one reason. The second reason is actually just the downturn, the economic downturn, which has meant that again the receivables, the top lines have not worked as much as they have. Now on both those counts, I think there will be some improvement if the fiscal deficit and the sort of fiscal governance at the center improves. And secondly, as the economy begins to look up and perk up, then there will be a better chance for these NPAs to be arrested and not increase any further. Finally, I think the public sector banks are now pretty much on notice to improve their NPA performance. And I know, for example, in the SBI, they're making a huge special effort to bring them bring them in control. So overall, I think the NPA situation, while worrisome, should not be seen as something which is getting out of hand and which will kind of lead to an implosion of the commercial banks, and especially not to the implosion of public sector banks in India.
Well, thank you so much. I think because that's an issue which has been kind of hovering in the background, and I think a lot of folks, especially in the finance and economic sectors, as you are, very much concerned with that, sir. A question coming to us from Abhijit Bhattacharya, I think from Texas. His question is that, I think it connects to a lot of issues. Why is Mr. Modi not responding to the issue of gas prices in India?
Yeah, Mr. Modi is not responding to this crash. Is not responded to the gas prices issues in India, like he has not responded to actually any substantive issue on the table at the moment in India. I think his strategy that I can notice is to remain at about 30,000 feet or 40,000 feet, to assure the people that he will be providing the kind of governance that the people need, and the governance and the regime that which is in contrast to the current one, and for him to announce or to pronounce on any such substantial issue without really getting into the depths of the nitty-gritty of it, but I think also will not be in the fitness of things. So so I think that is why he's refused to pronounce on the gas pricing issue, because these are all issues that he will have to take up when he forms the government. More importantly, I think Mr. Modi is, despite all the impression that he gives, believes in the delegation of authority and in the division of work. So he would rather consult his colleagues who would be in charge of this issue in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, rather than pronounce this himself. And as we know, in India, unfortunately, there is no system of having shadow cabinet ministers. So there is none, for example, in the BJP, who is being deputed to look into this task. It would have been better, as I said, unfortunately, it would have been better if there was such a system. But in the absence of that, I don't see how Mr. Modi can make a sort of substantial or a well thought, well considered announcement on this rather important issue.
Thank you. Quick two more questions, and I do know that you have another engagement right now to which you have to pull out, sir. One is that, what is your personal view regarding the issue of gas pricing in India? If you can summarize it in maybe 30 seconds to 45 seconds or a minute, please. What is your view on this issue? Because it seems to be issue.
One, that there was no reason at all for anybody to have approached the Election Commission for this, and it was not an Election Commission's business to pronounce on that, because this was a decision taken in June 2013. Only its implementation was due to start on 1st of April. Second, so it was not an issue that was in the purview of the Election Commission, in my view. Second, the committee headed by Dr. Rangarajan had looked at all the pertinent issues and then come up with this recommendation of $8 per MMBTU for the gas pricing, in a situation where India is already importing LNG at $15 to $16 per MMBTU. So that seemed reasonable to me. The last bit is that this charge by Kejriwal that this would increase double the price of electricity and fertilizers, etc., is completely misplaced, because these units are already getting their sale price to them is $6.65 per MMBTU. So the price increase would not be that much. And in any case, any price increase would be easily prevented by just increasing the subsidy, which I don't agree with, but that's the route that the government has taken. So it would be a fiscal burden and not result in an increase in prices.
Thank you so much. I think one last question coming in from Mahadev Bija, and we have other questions also which has just come in, I think, from Manav Chopra in DC.
But I'll have to leave.
Yes, sir. We can just take one last question. Kind of it refers to, from Mahadev, the fact that, and I think you referred to it a bit earlier, how can the Indian diaspora play an active kind of a role for governance over the 4 years rather than only the time around the elections, even if it can do something? I think you referred to it in your earlier part, but some suggestions, please. How can the diaspora really play an active or a positive contributory role?
The most important role that the diaspora can play is on improving the India-US bilateral relations. So as I said, there is a segment within the BJP which, on the misplaced notions of nationalism, tends to see US as being opposed to India's interests, and tends to see US as an imperialist power, etc., etc. I think there has to be a constant effort and a constant struggle to keep pushing this sentiment back in the country and within the BJP, and to show that given the current historical conjuncture and the economic and global conjunctures, a strategic partnership between India and the US is in India's direct interest, not just in terms of security, which I also think about, but really in terms of getting the economy back and getting the investment going there. The improvement in the B2B relations, both within the US and improving the environment for that, whether it is the visas or the totalization agreements or it is the license to our bank, etc., all of that has to be improved, and the diaspora can play a role there, raise its voice much louder. And the same thing I can say about the Indian situation, where for example, I'm not against the Supreme Court verdict against Novartis, because that's just one case of compulsory licensing. But the fact is that the IP regime needs to be much better working in India, and the financial sector has to be reformed. So there are these sectors and US interests which need to be looked after, and one should not feel embarrassed at all in pushing those interests, because that is in the Indian interest at this point of time to get its economy back on track and to generate the kind of employment that we need. And therefore, the diaspora's real role will be to ensure that the B2B India-US relationships remain on an even keel, in fact on a rising trend than what they have been in the past.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. There are a bunch of other questions coming in, but of course we'll always be in touch and continue this dialogue as part of our leadership dialogues. Thank you once again for your participation and your time, sir.
Thank you very much. I apologize that I have to leave, but there is something waiting. So bye to everybody, and it was great being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you, sir.
I will touch base with you.
Now, may I move on to our next eminent speaker, which is Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. He's the Professor of American Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University of India. He's, of course, the chairperson of the Center for American Latin and Canadian Studies at JNU. He's also been the Tagore Chair Professor at the Yunnan University in China. So apart from his specialization in the US, Indo-US relations, he has a keen insight on China and India-China's relations. He's also been a Fulbright Fellow, of course, and an author of countless books. Professor Mahapatra, may I invite you, please, for your opening remarks and overview of this election process, the trends, and what you see happening, sir.
Good evening, Ravinderji, and good morning to all my friends in the USA, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on the topic you decided. At the outset, let me make some broad observation about the election. Firstly, I would say that for the first time, the opposition party in India has fielded a prime ministerial candidate before the election. It has never happened before. The ruling party, of course, the Congress party, has often made it very clear who would be the prime minister. For a long, long time, when Nehru was the prime minister, then Indira Gandhi, things like that. But this time, the ruling party is not in a position to even name a PM candidate. Thirdly, the role of social media and the television is much more this time than ever before. And besides posters and rallies, the social media and TV will definitely influence the voting behavior of the people. Next, first time again, the world is very anxiously watching the elections in India. And why is that? It is because India is an emerging economy and a rising power. My next observation is we have been watching how the BJP is experiencing a leadership change slowly. The way the veteran leaders like L.K. Advani or even so many others are shunted out, and a new kind of leadership is coming to power, and that is going to impact upon India's policies, both the domestic and foreign, if the BJP is able to form the next government. And then, of course, we are witnessing tremendous amount of defection from the Congress party in the midst of the election. This is something new. Next, the name recognition of Modi is really fantastic. It is extremely important. The name of Gandhi and Nehru have been household names in India, but this time Modi has really caught up, and the name recognition is going to impact the election. Caste, religion, language will always have their traditional effect on the election, but this time corruption, inflation, gender insecurity, and misgovernance will shape the voters' choice. Now, I feel that BJP will most likely form the government with coalition partners under Modi leadership after May 16th. And the poor and the illiterate masses in India, which have often demonstrated their political skills, this time also they are going to do so and change the government. Another interesting factor this time is, before the election, three important movements took place. One is Anna Hazare, the other one led by Ramdev, and the third one is Kejriwal. And this itself is going to bring down the Congress party. Now, if BJP forms the government and Modi becomes the prime minister, what may be the foreign policy of the country? Been a long time ago, Bill Clinton once said it is economy stupid. And people who are talking about Indian election, they're saying this is Modi is stupid. And if Modi becomes the prime minister, his foreign policy will be economic stupid. So, in other words, I think his foreign policy will be largely defined by his economic agenda. The success story of Gujarat, which he wants to experiment in whole of India, and the vibrant Gujarat that he has been organizing for years now, his goal is to make India a vibrant India, and he can do that only when he puts economy as the #1 agenda in his foreign policy priorities and all. Modi has done fantastic business with Japan and even China. He has showcased his state in Southeast Asia and Latin America. And in fact, Modi happens to be the first and so far the only state leader to have got a red carpet welcome in Japan. And he was pretty popular in quite a few states in China, and he's going to build up that relationship both with China and Japan. And of course, he will be very tough on terrorism. He will try to build up the Indian military strength, and will be less confrontational with neighbors. Some people think that he's going to have a very robust and muscular approach to the neighborhood. I doubt it very much. If he wants to really achieve his economic goals, then he knows that neighborhood has to be peaceful. So he's not going to make any kind of confrontation with the neighborhood, whether Pakistan or any other country. Now, everybody knows that very little will change in the fundamentals of the country's foreign policy. But Modi is most likely to advocate a peaceful neighborhood with a larger economic mission elsewhere. And economically, he will adopt a very broad-based policy rather than put most of the eggs in the American basket. He will try to engage Europe and Asia as well, in addition to the United States. How about US-India relationship if Modi is the next Prime Minister? I feel that Modi will not take any fresh initiative towards the United States during early years of his rule. He will rather expect the US to make the first move, and if that move comes from Washington, then he may appropriately respond. Now, is he going to respond positively or not? I think the way he was very willing to meet the US Ambassador Nancy Powell recently, but at the same time, he showed unwillingness when Wall Street Journal wanted to interview him. That shows that he is going to be choosy in this, and he will respond on the basis of his ideas and not jump to any kind of invitation from the United States. However, I strongly feel that if the Obama administration sends him an invitation to visit Washington soon, then he may rather gladly accept it, and he is going to do it. He understands that Muslim countries in the neighborhood, which are having tremendous amount of anti-American sentiment among the people, do not deny any visa to the US officials, despite their perception that America plays a tremendous amount of role in the innocent deaths of the Muslim people. In fact, no demand in India has been made so far to deny a visa to, suppose, New York officials or any other US officials when the hate crimes against the Sikhs took place. So he understands that all these things are basically domestic issues, and domestic politics in the US Congress are partly responsible for the visa issue. Very recently, I think yesterday or day before, we saw yet another congressional hearing on this particular issue of religious freedom in India and all. He knows, but at the same time, he is a pragmatic person, and he is not going to have any grudge against the United States, and he will do business. So far, he has not made any negative remarks against the United States. Although he has visited China many times and he has been a friend of many Chinese in quite a few cities, but he has made critical remarks about China when he visited Arunachal Pradesh. But as far as the US is concerned, he has not made any negative remark. Now, I feel that if you really want some kind of big picture idea to restore Indo-US relationship, which is really rocky because of Devjani Khobragade issue, one of the ways would be for the US administration to invite Modi to Washington, because the US has decided to exit from Afghanistan, and situation in Afghanistan is going to be very difficult after 2014, whether the US troops stay on or they withdraw completely. The impact on the US will be as much as the impact in the neighborhood, because we don't know how the Islamic extremists are going to hit whom, where, and all that. So I think one of the important things that the US could do would be to reach out to India, and that is going to be relatively easy if the next ambassador to India would be a political heavyweight. He can really change the dynamics, and he can reach out to the new Indian government. New US ambassador, new Indian government, there can be a new beginning, and Indo-US relationship can be back on the rail. I think at the moment, let me observe, these are my observations, and I can take any questions.
Wonderful, sir, wonderful. You've taken a fantastic, overview, roadmap. In fact, this question of when will perhaps Mr. Modi visit the US, if he does, one option would be, I think, the upcoming UN General Assembly, and therein is the right occasion for maybe the White House to invite him to come down to DC, as you're saying. That is wonderful. Now, the question coming in from one of our guests is that, what do you think really happened with the U.S. ambassador's resignation, or, as is being said, retirement of Nancy Powell? I mean, of course, we are seeing that partly it was maybe the Devyani episode, or maybe the aspect to reset U.S.-India relations in expectations of the Modi government. What do you think was the perception here in Delhi, why the ambassador went?
You know, earlier when Ambassador Romer resigned, after India failed to give those tenders to Lockheed Martin and Boeing, people quickly drew the conclusion that he's leaving in resenting the Indian government decision to do so. But I think these are the perceptions of events which take place so quickly within a given time. But in this particular case, I strongly feel that there are people in the State Department who felt that Devyani issue could have been handled in a much better way than it was done. The US was pretty stubborn on this, and the government of India, I would say, overreacted rather too quickly and took stronger position on a range of issues. And in the process, there was no face saving for either the American side or the Indian side. And partly, the ambassador was responsible, particularly when the Richard family were literally, in Indian perception, hijacked a way to USA from India and were given concessional tickets and visa. The US ambassador, of course, knew all this. So they thought that a change, now there is a thinking in Delhi that if a new person comes, then we can say goodbye to the past events and start fresh.
Great. Thank you so much, and absolutely. Now that kind of leads into another question. Are there any recommendations, if not, of course not recommendations, but thoughts circulating, or what India thinks could be, who could be the next ambassador, or what kind of a person or personality should that person be, who could, help reset and lead and nurture US-India relations at this juncture? Some potential names.
Ambassadors are, appointed not on the basis of the desire of the receiving country. It is decided by the state concerned to promote the interest of that particular country. So I think ultimately the US will decide who would be the best person, although some names are circulating and some people think that maybe an Indian American coming to India as ambassador would do a wonderful job. Nothing like that, nothing like that. In fact, only in the recent past, when a Chinese origin American was appointed as ambassador to China, he became very unpopular in China, and finally when he was leaving China, some people thought this guy is just like a banana, and his skin is yellow, but deep inside he's really white. So I think I think that it would be good for the US and for India to have a political appointee who would have the ear of the president, like Ambassador Blackwell was close to President George Bush, and many ambassadors don't have this luxury of having the ear of the president. So right now, given the situation, I mean, the Indo-US relationship, I strongly feel that slightly now derailed, and there's a long shadow over the relationship because of the Devyani issue. We need a politically astute person who would have the ear of the president to come to Delhi so that he can really rebuild the relationship and put it back on the rail.
Yeah, very much. So in fact, there are various terms for the Indian American community, like a coconut brown on the outside, white inside, or a potato which is brown outside and maybe white inside. Yes, one knows of Gary Locke. And another example could also be the Australian High Commissioner to India, Mr. Verghese, who was also of Indian origin, and where also, so these are case studies of Gary Locke and Mr. Verghese. I would have then just maybe one question, and before I hand it to my colleague Sanjay in Washington, D.C., now, you mentioned that, some big picture idea, if it could be there, but probably it should come from the U.S. side to which Mr. Modi could respond. Now, do you think, is there some such big picture idea could be, okay, the nuclear deal was one, there has been talk about space cooperation or maybe some other big picture, could be thorium, could be solar, What would you think is something like that, or what could be some such focus area, please, sir?
I personally think that one particular item would be the energy cooperation between the two countries, partly because the 123 agreement is not taking up the ground, and partly because Modi himself is very much concerned about the environmental issues. He has written a book on environment. He is promoting solar energy in Gujarat. There is a figure that 40% of electricity comes from solar energy in Gujarat. So Modi will be amenable to the idea of having a big initiative on energy cooperation. A lot of things are already happening in the non-nuclear sector, but it can be put on the agenda, and that can be one of the fundamental big picture item where India and the US can renew the dialogue. The second thing would be actually terrorism, because for a long time the Americans divided terrorism into two types. One is domestic, the other one was international. Kashmir terrorism for a long time was considered domestic issue of India. Only after this 9/11 incident in 2001, things began to change. Now, once the US troops withdraw from Afghanistan, again terrorism is going to take a different shape. If thousands of American troops and NATO troops could not really contain Taliban, once they get out, what would be the role of the new government in Afghanistan is a big headache for the neighboring countries as well as the United States, because the US may have developed a good homeland security system, but the US is a global power with global presence, and Islamic terrorism can really hit the American interest in any part of the world. So, post-2014 Afghanistan is going to create a new kind of problem where India and the US can really cooperate. And Indians think that the US is really not consulting with India enough on the exit strategy from Afghanistan. Rather, more recently, there was a delegation to China where they talked about Afghanistan, but they put India out of the loop. So this is another issue where actually India's interest will also be served, and it can be a big initiative.
Fantastic, Professor Mahapatra. That's a wonderful, I think, range of answers and overviews you've given so kindly in such a context. Now, I shall hand over the conference to my colleague, Mr. Sanjay Puri in Washington, D.C. for some wrap-up and some questions which are still coming in. Believe me, we have such a backlog right now at my end, but sure. Sanjay, please, with you.
Thank you, Ravinder. Professor, such wonderful insight. Really appreciate it. Our listeners who are from all over the country and around the world will appreciate it. Our listeners are Indian Americans, are members of U.S. Congress, staff, think tank analysts. They are going to get your insight, and this will also be a podcast that will be distributed. Professor, I have a couple of quick questions that are coming in from our listeners around the world. One is getting down to your perception, and a lot of other, we had another caller before this, Rajiv Kumar, who also said it looks like the NDA or the BJP-led NDA is going to come into power. What do you see the combination permutation? Some of our folks who are really into politicking say, how do they get to that number with, because even with Shiv Sena and others, do you see some parties like Jay Lalita's party coming in, etc.? What is your feeling as to, let's say, Jay Lalita coming in as a partner, or Mamata Banerjee coming in? What would you say to that?
The kind of permutation and combination that we are witnessing now, it is very clear that once the election results are out, the next round of permutation combination will depend on those numbers, the real numbers. If the BJP manages about 200 plus, then obviously Narendra Modi's chances of becoming the Prime Minister and some other political groups joining the NDA will be much bright. However, if the BJP gets about 170, 160 like that, then a new kind of situation will be created where some of the political parties, particularly the regional political parties, might yet again read out the old mantra that we don't want a polarizing personality like Modi to become the Prime Minister, and if you have a new person, then we might think about it. So there is a likelihood that BJP may be able to form the NDA without Modi. But if the Modi magic really works and he gets more than 200, he manages, then of course, certainly there are political parties which are dead against Modi now will suddenly change their color and they will join. It's all because of their respective interest to capture power.
Do you have any specific parties like the Mamata Banerjee's party or Jayalalitha's party, in your view, that would be joining?
You know, even Mamata Banerjee and Jayalalitha might also join because, you know, Modi actually is playing his cards very well. Now, many people thought that he would take a very hardline position on Muslims, but he's saying that I believe that there should be more toilets than temples. That is really dealing with the common man. Then he's saying that there is only one religion for me, that is India first, the nation first. Then again he's saying that there is only one holy book, and that is the Constitution of India. So by trying to convince the other political parties and the people of India that he should not be regarded as a hardcore communal person, rather he is the one who wants to rebuild India, make India vibrant, then his success in the election battlefield will enable him to rope in even Jayalalitha and Mamata Banerjee and many others.
Oh, that's very good to know. We have one last question that's coming in from Manav Chopra in Washington, D.C. There was there's been a spate of hearings or at least resolutions in Congress against Mr. Modi, and there was a hearing that really brought up the whole issue of Gujarat again, and USINPAC took a position that we should not be interfering in India's elections. How does this play out in India, if at all, from the Congress or other parties' perspective, given that we obviously had people there who were talking about not interfering in India's election? This is a closed issue and it's an India issue.
You know, first of all, let me say that majority of the voters in India would not even know what happened in the U.S. Congress. Maybe some mainstream English newspapers like Times of India and others will carry this news, and it is not going to spread to the nook and corner of India, and nobody is going to make much noise on this, nor are they going to base their perception on the basis of the hearings in Washington, D.C. Having said that, there are people in the urban areas, the educated masses who are understanding it, who understand foreign policy and all, they think that this is an interference in the internal affairs of India. There are many things happening within the United States of similar kind, whether it is violation of human rights or even racial profiling, and there are so many instances. People who study America, they know it very well. So they think that in the U.S. Congress, this kind of politics should not be played. But at the same time, they're aware that there are certain people who are against Modi, and they are the brains behind it. And majority of the congressmen and the senators don't have a position on this. Only a handful of people, probably some evangelists, probably some pro-Pakistan element maybe, who are actually behind all this. And the unfortunate thing is the 3 or 4 people who were invited to testify, their views are already known. That is why they think that it was an anti-Modi kind of step in the U.S. Congress, and it is unwelcome in India.
And we had some of members of Congress who spoke in favor of staying out of the democracy. USINPAC has, before even when there was a resolution 417, we had the chairman of Foreign Relations Committee saying it will never come to a vote, and we made sure it did not. And again, in this hearing, we made it clear to Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and Congressman Phale Muaga that this was a clear interference in India's democratic process. But Professor Mahapatra, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have a continuing dialogue, because these elections are viewed with tremendous interest here because they are very consequential. And I also want to thank all our volunteers, all the people who have put this program together, because it takes a lot of efforts. It's John Zaides, Rabinder Sachdev, Vikram Chauhan, Surbi Garg, it's Ria Banerjee, and countless other volunteers who have been doing this. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, everyone, for joining our 2014 Indian Election Series conference call. We are simply overwhelmed by the response. This now concludes our call. We hope you join us next weekend at 11 a.m. Eastern for another call. You will receive dial-in instructions automatically if you have already signed up for a call previously. We look forward to seeing you on our Facebook page and to the many means of contacting USINPAC at usinpac.com. Thank you.